Good evening, and welcome to the December 18th City Council meeting. I call the meeting to order, and would everybody please stand, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, councilors, and on the consent docket, does anyone wish to clarify an item, or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Please vote. And with a vote of 4-0, the consent docket is approved. That brings us to public comment on agenda items not scheduled for public hearing. We have 3 speakers tonight. The first person who signed up was Michael Oliver. And Michael, if you'd come up and read your address and state your name.
Yes, my name is Michael Oliver, live at 1123 South Gray. Thank you for letting me speak.
Well, welcome. And you have 3 minutes.
Yes. Thank you for your insistence that the neighborhood along 12th Avenue should have a voice in any development that happens in our neighborhood. This process has lasted for over a year and been both educational and frustrating. At the City Council's direction, the neighborhood developed a plan that would help protect the existing 60-plus-year-old neighborhood that cannot be replaced once it's lost, while allowing some limited business development. We would request that the council amend the mixed-use overlay boundaries to the original area suggested by the neighborhood. We have considered many aspects of possible development as we formulated our plan. We feel that the original proposal by the neighborhood preserves the integrity of the neighborhood without splitting it down the middle. The mixed-use area proposed by us allows new businesses to serve the neighborhood, but we follow a logical, natural boundary of the floodplain to separate the two. During past meetings, we never observed a floodplain map being displayed to help inform decisions. We are concerned that this valuable information hasn't been fully considered. Maybe this information was well known to all involved, but that knowledge was not discussed in a public setting. We created a list of businesses that we feel would best suit the neighborhood in both scale and service. We considered excessive runoff created by large paved parking lots and the existing drainage, or lack of drainage in some cases, in the flood-prone area on 12th Avenue. For this reason, we believe that it is in the interest of the neighborhood and the city to follow our recommendations. We started with planning staff holding meetings to gather resident input. Roughly 60 residents started attending these meetings, but attendance has slowly declined as residents became frustrated and discouraged that their voices were not being heard. A small group of us has persevered and believe we reflect the attitude of the majority of residents in our neighborhood. I went door to door to speak with everyone in the original study area that we are considering tonight. Based on my conversations with residents, both owners and renters, everyone expressed concern about business development. I don't recall anyone expressing that they welcome commercial development on the north side of 12th Street. Comments have been made in the past that surveys taken by planning staff showed some desire for commercial development. We feel that these results were skewed since the developers attended these meetings and voted in favor of commercial development. This practice does not accurately reflect the neighborhood attitudes and should be modified in the future if the goal is to understand the desire of residents. I think the desire of the developers are evident. We also strongly disagree that there is an unavoidable need for commercial development in our neighborhood. As an example, a large office building sits empty and construction uncompleted on the south side of 12th Avenue across from Pine Street. This building towers over the existing houses and is completely out of touch with the scale of the area. There is so little interest in in any businesses locating to this area that the building still does not have a completed facade, interior, or parking lot. We should not allow other developers to build in our neighborhood just to have these buildings abandoned. The existing building and proposed development on 1220 12th Avenue amounts to little more than speculation, in my opinion. And for these reasons, I believe that the council would be making a wise decision to amend the mixed-use boundary to the neighborhood's original proposal. You have any questions?
Anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mr. Dorman, before we have the other two speakers come up, would you mind explaining a little bit about the ordinance that I believe they've looked at on the agenda?
Right. Yeah, the ordinance that's out there tonight, a little explanation is probably in order. As you know, the charter requires 2 readings for every ordinance. There's a first reading, and then if it goes on first reading, then it's advanced to second reading. According to the charter, you can do a first reading by simply reading the title of the ordinance. And so while we have basically got the title of the ordinance written, the remainder of the items that you see here in front of you tonight are basically an extremely rough draft. We have not gone through and done any of the editing or anything to put this in proper form to actually bring it for you in terms of an ordinance that you could actually pass. And in particular, I would note that the map that is in here and the absence of a legal description, that's only the area that has been covered by the past hearings. It's not the area that will be covered by hearings that are coming along in January and early February. So what we are going to actually do is put this thing in proper form, assuming that you advance this to second reading by title only. Then we would remove the map that is in here, and we would put this text into proper form, and then we would submit it. We would put it back out for the public to look at for a possible second reading on the 8th. Our intent was to try to move this thing along because the hope was to try to get the text in place before we brought the rest of the area into the overlay itself, so that everyone knew what the text was going to be and what everything would entail. So that's what we're working on right now. Substantively, it won't change, but in terms of how it is in place here and how it's actually written, we will go through and edit that to where it's in proper legal form. So tonight, all you have is just a title to read for first reading, and if you're not comfortable doing that, we can certainly hold up until it's in full form and bring it back to you on the meeting on the 8th.
And then it would have to, that would be the first reading would be on the 8th, and so we would wait how many days after that?
You would be your second meeting in January before you could do a second read on it. So it's whatever you're comfortable with. If you don't want to read it by title tonight, that's perfectly fine. We just simply wanted to give you the opportunity to try to advance this thing down the road, because I know it has been taking some time, but this is not, as I think the gentleman mentioned, we've been at this for a year, so we want to make sure we get it right when it comes to you for actual passage.
Okay, we have 2 more speakers. I'll go ahead and call them up. I don't know if your explanation maybe helped explain something for the speakers. If not, but I'm going to go ahead and call Shirley Weeks.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. So what's going on? Why are we having the first read of the 12th Street overlay on the agenda tonight? I understand the explanation. Why couldn't it have been on the first meeting in November? Why couldn't it have been on the second meeting in November? Why did we wait till this time for it to be on read only? I also would like to know why we were not notified that this would be on the agenda tonight. Not even our neighborhood coordinator, Michael, was notified. We've been very active in this, and I think it would have been good if we'd been notified. We did everything you asked us to do. You started us on the journey of the 12th Street study as you recognized and defined this area as a viable, safe, affordable residential neighborhood. The planning staff did their work. The citizens did their work. The city council did their work. So who dropped the ball? It makes me wonder, has owner-occupied homes been placed on the endangered species list? We need your help. Do you have the authority to fix this unbelievable mix-up? Please continue to support the overlay. Do you have the authority to withdraw the altered boundaries and adopt the original 12th Street overlay as presented to you by the staff? Is it just an odd, unusual circumstance that the first read by title only is on the City Council meeting tonight and a commercial PUD is on the Planning Commission tomorrow night? This schedule threatens the integrity of the 12th Street Conservation Overlay Area. How did this happen and why did it happen? Is this just a procedure mix-up or is it incompetence of the legal department? They have had over 2 months to finalize the overlay as amended by the council in the early fall. I'm asking you to find a way to fix this botched procedure. Protect and preserve the neighborhood with the 12th Street overlay process, do the legal work, finalize the overlay, and freeze the zoning changes in area until overlay is legally adopted. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for supporting the overlay and starting our pathway to the overlay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weeks. Our final speaker tonight, if he wishes to speak, is Alan Brunken.
My name is Alan Brunken. I live at 2820 West 15th, not in the area of 12th Street, but I was invited by the city staff to be a part of this study. My comments are going to be made based upon what I heard the counselors talk about in that meeting. I believe it was the first meeting in October. I would like to encourage you to modify the motion as it is now going to be written up in legal form sometime, because the information that was the basis for your deliberations was incomplete and inaccurate. And it was incomplete and inaccurate because the land use plan that you were looking at did not accurately or completely illustrate the concept that the neighborhood association had. That concept has mixed use on Washington Street. Washington Street goes north and south as you, and it intersects 12th Street. And it had a residential area going the complete length of the north side of 12th Street to maintain the integrity, that strong integrity that the neighborhood has on the north side of 12th Street. What was not shown that's vital for some reason is the floodplain that exists stretching from Washington beyond Jefferson. It was shown for some reason as mixed use, illegal, but it was shown on the maps prepared by city staff as mixed use. Councilor Joyce asked a very good question. I remember it clearly in my mind. Where is a logical meeting point between mixed use and residential? That is a critical question. If you looked at that map, it showed mixed use already going along 12th Street. And that was a good question because there was, it was not clearly, there was no concept. We feel that the logical separation or meeting point is expressed by the floodplain. And why that is important, 12th Street is not a minor arterial, as we all know, and is written up in an upcoming PUD, going to be presented tomorrow, identifies it, believe it or not, as a minor arterial. It is the major circulation corridor for the south side of Stillwater. All of you who live on the south side of Stillwater, I ask you, is 12th Street a minor street? I don't think so. So it's 4-lane, 40-mile-per-hour street, carries a lot of traffic. If we introduce mixed use on 12th Street, it's going to do two things. It's going to slow down the traffic. For safety reasons, has to be slower, the speed limit. And it's also going to be a cancer, if I may use the word, on the integrity of the residential area. Already exhibited by the PUD that's going to be presented to the Planning Commission tomorrow. That PUD,
Okay, we've been
okay.
3 minutes,
all
been
right,
past
well,
3 minutes, and we haven't heard the PUD yet.
Okay, well, whatever information you need, thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselors, questions, comments? I would like, no?
I don't, I'm going to save my comments until we get to the ordinance.
Okay. Anybody? Okay. All right, we're going to move forward then. Thank you to all the speakers who came tonight and registered, and let us hear what you think. All right, that takes us to public hearings. Item A, receive public comment regarding a request for a map amendment to rezone property located at 423 West 8th Avenue from RT Residential 1 and 2 Family District to the RTM Residential Multifamily CC-17-168. Mr. McNichol.
Paula Dennison, Development Services Director, will provide the report.
Good evening. We have before you a map amendment request for property located at 423 West 8th Avenue. What you see in the hatched outlined area is the location of the property. It's at the southeast corner of 8th and West Streets. The current zoning is RT, or two-family, residential two-family. And you can see the lots to the south, immediately to the south are RT, as well as the lot above, directly across 8th Avenue. North of that, it's an RT PUD. Then to the east is immediately adjacent office, and office PUD is going to be on the north side of 8th. On the west side of West, the properties are zoned RSS, which is single-family, small lot residential. Here's a street view of the property. The house was built in the 1930s as a large single-family house on an approximate 5,000 square foot lot. Stillwater Domestic Violence Shelter acquired the site, and they did some work on the house as a single-family structure, still maintaining one dwelling unit, to have the ability to have 8 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms for their domestic violence purposes. However, the domestic violence sold the property in around 2012. The person that acquired the property at that time actually went in and created 3 separate dwelling units within this single-family structure. There were no building permits obtained, and the zoning did not change, so therefore the conversion is an illegal conversion of the property. Here's another street view. You can see the small buildings on the east side of the property. Each one of these are storage buildings. that go along with the use in the existing structure. And the only parking available is currently on the driveway that has been in place for many, many years. Summary of the, how we got here. The property has recently been purchased by another gentleman, and he is making this request to go from RT to RMI, which allows 50 dwelling units per acre. Again, we have a very small lot, parcel, in consideration, but he is asking for the map amendment in order to continue the 3 separate dwelling unit use of this structure. So that is his request this evening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have of me.
Who wants to go first?
So has this property been inspected since these quote-unquote improvements were made? Has anybody inspected this house?
No, sir.
Okay. And as far as the parking situation goes, so the only parking right now is in the driveway of the house. This is a 3-apartment structure right now, so the only overflow parking we would have would be where?
In the street or properties around the vicinity.
Okay. My only final quick comment would be that even if we did rezone this tonight to an RMI zoning designation, this would have to carry a legal non-conforming status, correct? I mean, as I understand it, the RMI zoning designation requires a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet.
Yes, sir, it does. And greater setbacks than what this property, than what the existing structure has
Right.
in its current condition.
Yeah, okay. I'm done for now.
What's the C3 plan for this area?
The comp plan, give me just a moment.
I saw high-density housing, I think, in the report, but I wasn't sure what that meant. How high-density did it?
High density is, low density in the comp plan is up to 12 units per acre. Medium is going to hit 20 to 30, so high density is going to be the over 30 units per acre.
So the comp plan shows this eventually being higher density.
Correct.
So that, I mean, the requested zoning would match the C3 plan.
That is correct.
What happens with, I mean, if it is rezoned, and so the 3 dwelling unit part is within the zoning code, what happens with the fact that there's not parking? There's all the other elements of the property that don't meet the established zoning code. Is there a, I mean, if we change the zoning, is it just get used as a 3-apartment complex without any further issues, or is there something else that has to happen?
Yes, the zoning only allows the use as is currently asked for. So the 3 separate apartment dwelling units inside this one structure. Until and unless there are modifications made to the structure or to the site itself, the zoning cannot go back in time and require compliance just because you applied the zoning.
Okay.
That answer?
So assuming nothing is done to the property, it can be operated as a 3-apartment dwelling unit with no further permit needed, nothing else needs to happen.
If the zoning is approved, correct.
What if the zoning isn't approved?
If the zoning is not approved, then that will be a enforcement action that will have to be pursued with the current property owner.
Counselor Zanotti, questions? All right. Yeah. Anything else, counselors?
Right now.
Recommendation?
Public hearing first,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yes. We don't have anyone for the public hearing? Okay, all right. So I will open the public hearing, and there's no one to speak. I will close the public hearing and ask Ms. Dennison for, I didn't have any paperwork for,
Mr. and Mrs. Vaught are the actual owners of the property currently who have made this request. So if the council would
Okay.
wish to hear from them.
okay. All right.
Okay, we'll try to, John Vaught, 5016 Woodland Drive. And you've got the information, sounds like. I don't have much to deviate from what she expanded on. The only issue was, our intent was not to buy the property and rezone it. That's not how we came to this. We came to this, when we purchased the property, we received 3 sets of keys, 3 rent rolls. It was advertised as a 3-apartment unit. We had no reason to believe otherwise. So then I get a notice from the city saying we're out of compliance, so we evicted the upstairs tenant. So we have 2 tenants now to come into compliance. So that's where we're at. So when I got the eviction notice, or when I got the notice that we were out of compliance, met with the city planner, that's who gave us the notice, and he gave us some options. And instead of having litigation, we thought we would try this first. So that's where we're at, and that's why we're here. As far as to update you a little bit on the property, it does have panic hardware upstairs for egress. It does have 2 exits. Each property does have 2 exits. It's got an audible fire alarm system in it. It's got emergency lighting system in it. So the women's shelter did do a pretty good job. I think they used it actually probably a heavier use than what we would be using it. As far as the parking, we would be more than happy, and the city planner said he would love to see put more parking in there. There's plenty of room for driveway and a couple different locations to give everybody parking. We're more than happy to do that. The only problem with the bringing everything up is it's a pretty devastating remodel to put in a sprinkler system in a house that was 80 years old. So it has been well taken care of and so forth. But anyway, long story short, we're trying to do the right thing, and that's why we're here. And if it's not the right thing, I guess we need some jurisdiction or somebody to advise us how to move from here. We really don't want to do the litigation thing. Nobody usually wins in that situation, and so we were advised to try this first, and that's we're not trying to run over a neighborhood. We're not trying to, the house was obviously. Ordinances came around the house over time, apparently. But as far as the remodel part of it, when it was remodeled and how, nobody really knows. As far as the way I can see, all the door frames, everything, it doesn't look like anything has changed since the house was built. The only thing I do know, there was a garage there, and that garage now is 2 bedrooms. Everything else looks pretty similar to probably what it did in its day. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Does
Any
anybody have any
questions?
questions?
When you bought the property, did you buy it from a third party, or,
We bought it from an individual through a realtor,
okay,
and they were the ones that bought it from the women's shelter.
and it was marketed as a 3-bedroom apartment complex?
It was.
Did you all do any sort of due diligence on did you have inspections?
I've got to claim guilty, because it had three storage sheds next door, had three sets of keys, 3 row rents. The realtors told us it was 3 units, and here it's bringing 3 different rents. So financially, it made sense. I had no reason to even think for a second that it was out of compliance. And I guess I'll have to plead guilty on that one.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I will close the public hearing now, and Ms. Dennison.
Yes, thank you. The Planning Commission at their last meeting is sending a recommendation of approval of the map amendment request on a 3-to-1 vote. I'll be happy to answer any
Counselors,
further questions.
This every week it seems like we sit up here and say this, but this is an interesting case here. We appreciate you trying to do the right thing, John, and trying to fall back into compliance with the zoning rules, et cetera, et cetera. There's a couple of problems I have with this. One, at least the way I understand it, is that there were several modifications made to the structure after the structure was sold from the shelter. If these improvements, whatever you want to call them, have not been inspected, if you're going to put 3 families into a structure that we have no idea what the structural soundness of is, that's a little scary. The other issue would be the parking, obviously. So, I mean, if we went ahead and approved this zoning, there's still a fair amount of work that needs to be done. Zoning compliance is one thing, but safety is another issue or concern I have here. Again, you fall into bum deals every day, and it sounds like you got a little bit of a bum deal here. That being said, with the issue of the question of structural soundness, again, this building was built in the 1930s. Who knows when the last time it was inspected? That is an issue for me, especially if you're going to make it a multifamily dwelling. And so, that's my major concern here, is that there's safety issues above just legal compliance with zoning laws. So that's all I need to say right now, I think.
I'd echo some of those same concerns. I think, though, at the same time, given it's a zoning question, right? So our concern is, does the requested zoning fit the nature of this property? Does it fit the surrounding uses? All that sort of thing, right? I've said, I think this a few times, but it's hard for us, and I think not correct for us, to try to make zoning decisions based on the individual use of the property at the time. Because, as we've seen in other cases, those properties can be sold the next day, and that zoning stays in place whether that person's doing what they said they were going to do with it or not. And so, from a matter of zoning, it's a land use issue and an issue that we need to look at. What is this land best suited for? Should it be this new RMI zoning, or should it stay how it is? I think given that the C3 plan calls for higher density zoning in the area is a factor that I generally like to consider. I think if you look at the surrounding property, there's a vacant basically just to the east. I think it's all mostly the church property, office, and some of it's open lot. So it doesn't feel like high density zoning there would be a problem, given the surrounding uses. We don't have any neighbors here objecting to the high density zoning in this area, and given those factors, to me it makes some sense, even though I don't like at all this non-conforming house on the property. I mean, that's a problem, and I think we need to figure out a way to address some of those issues. At the same time, we're talking about zoning a lot that doesn't fit the zoning, right? So if you had a 15,000 acre lot or 15,000 square foot lot that fit the zoning, everything else, I think, to me, it would be a no-brainer. Yeah, we change it. But to put that high-density zoning on a lot that's not even allowed within that zoning classification doesn't make any sense to me. So if we're just looking at it from the standpoint of saying, does RMI zoning fit this lot? I don't think there's any way we can say yes, just based on the fact that this lot is not the size of an RMI zoning that's required for RMI zoning. And so it makes plenty of sense in a lot of different ways, but given the size of the lot, I think I would have to say, just based on should this lot be RMI, I can't say that it should, because it doesn't meet the square foot recommendations for that zoning classification in the first place. So this is a tough one, and it's not one that I don't think there's a good answer here at all. But from my standpoint, given what we're asked to do from a zoning classification standpoint, is does this lot meet the characteristics for RMI zoning? Based on its size, it doesn't. Based on all the other factors, I think it would. But I don't think we can rezone it based on that characteristic.
Councilor Zanotti.
I've been quiet. Listening to both John and Will talk, Councilor Wedlake and Councilor Joyce, I agree. I think this is a challenging one. I agree with Councilor Joyce's. If we are going to make the decision based on what the requirements of this does call for size-wise, it doesn't. And so that changes, to me, I'm sorry, but we need to stick with some consistency. So to me, that's what we need to think about.
It's exactly what I was going to say and what I had written down. Size of lot, it's not RMI, it's just not. Okay, so is there a motion?
Well, I guess I will make a motion to deny the rezoning request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to deny the rezoning request on item A, CC-17-168. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0 to deny the request. Well, I guess we have denied the request with a vote of 4-0. Okay, that takes us to
I'm right.
general orders. Mr. McNichol.
We have a presentation by the Oklahoma Aviation and Aerospace Economic Impact Study, and that will be presented by Grayson Arties, manager of the Airport Development Division of the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. And I guess Paul's going to introduce him.
Hi, thank you. I'm Paul Pregel. I'm the assistant director at Stillwater Airport, and I just wanted to introduce Grayson Arties. As Mr. McNichol said, he is the manager of the Airport Division, Airport Development Division at Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission, and he's also the project manager over this economic impact study. So there's not too many people in this state that I know that know this better, so we're very gracious to have him. I would point out he is an OU graduate, multiple degrees, but he was able to wear an orange tie for us tonight. So I cannot express how proud I am of him. So please welcome Grayson.
This is actually one of my favorite ties. I really do like it. Thank you all for allowing me to come present some of the good news about our aviation economic impact study. I've been told I have 10 minutes, so let's hop up to 35,000 feet and make it to about 500 knots, because we do have a large presentation to go through. With that being said, if I go through a slide and I miss something and you want me to go back, by all means, just please let me know. Quick show of hands, though, if I can ask, who here has used the commercial airline service at Stillwater Regional Airport? All right, that's impressive, folks. I know Gary Johnson here has told you how impressive it is, but seeing the things that I see on the national scene about aviation, this is something that most people don't ever get to experience in their lifetime. A new town getting commercial air service for the first time in a long time, that's something to be proud of. So pat yourself on the back and thank Gary and thank his team for doing that, because it's great to see it from downtown Oklahoma City and seeing the success that Oklahoma gets to have in the news. So with that being said, we conducted an economic impact study over the last 2 years. Most people understand Stillwater Regional Airport, Boeing, American Airlines in Tulsa, Tinker Air Force Base, so on and so forth, Vance Air Force Base in Enid. But they don't really understand that aviation aerospace is comprised of 3 main sectors, and that's what you'll see on the screen. First and foremost, we have our 109 public airports, which is what most people are pretty visible with. They understand that we have the airport system here in the state, like Stillwater Regional, Tulsa International, Will Rogers, which I'm sure most everyone here has flown out of at some point in time in their life. And then we also have a bunch of other general aviation airports across the state. We have military aviation, which is the biggest sector of our economy here in Oklahoma in terms of aviation aerospace. That comprises mainly our 3 Air Force bases, Tinker Air Force Base, Vance, and Altus, plus some Air National Guard impacts at our 2 commercial service airports, the 137th and 138th Fighter Wings, respectively at Will Rogers and Tulsa International. And then we have the Army National Guard, which has an aviation component in it as well. All that being said, all these on-airport operations, all these military operations have a lot of off-airport aviation aerospace companies that support them. It's been going on since World War II. These aviation aerospace companies, whether it's parts manufacturers, whether it's somebody that wants to make some new aviation technology piece that's going to go into a drone, it's really been supportive. And we keep aircraft in the air. You know, right up the street, up I-35, Wichita, America, they build aircraft. We've never really built aircraft. Clyde Cessna out in the Great Salt Plains, he tried to stay here. We couldn't get him to hang around. He went up to Wichita. But we keep airplanes in the air. American Airlines in Tulsa, Oklahoma, largest civilian MRO facility, maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Same thing for Tinker. Tinker is the largest military MRO facility in the world. That being said, this is obviously just a map of the country. Here are all the great things, all of the great destinations that you can go on an airplane with, a commercial or general aviation across the state. And this doesn't even include the international destinations. From Oklahoma, this is where aircraft and people went in the calendar year of 2016. A few key study terms I want you all to be familiar with. Direct impacts, that's the things that we can physically measure. Those are survey results, those are tax records, so on and so forth, that we know that aviation aerospace companies actually have in the state. Those are direct employees like Gary, like Paul, and others here at the airport. We have indirect and induced impacts. That's when those dollars that are born from those direct impacts get recycled into the local economy, whether it's from hotels, parts manufacturers, industrial applications, or even just a simple restaurant or service industry. You have the in-plan model, which is the accepted econometric model that all these dollars and cents get into. And trust me, I am not a PhD economist. Do we have any of those here in the room? No? Okay. I'm not a PhD economist by any stretch of the imagination, but that is the model that these dollars and cents get put into, and you get the output from that model depending upon which way you're putting in the data. Annual economic activity, which you'll hear me talk a lot about. You'll also hear me say annual economic impact. I kind of use them interchangeably. That is the annual payroll for folks, as well as the annual spending that a company does. Combined together, that gets you your annual economic activity. And the one thing to remember here is this is a snapshot in time. Last time we did this study back in 1994, published in 96. We had another study published in 2000. It's just a snapshot in time. So I guarantee you the numbers you've seen today have probably gone up given the amount of air traffic that you've had just on your commercial service alone, because I think we estimated fairly low, and I think Gary's going to surpass that if I remember right from our conversations last week. So your economic impact in this study that you see today is even greater today than it was since this snapshot was 2016. So that being said, this is just a statewide high-level impact of all the three sectors. Obviously the biggest, military aviation, $19.3 billion. Second biggest, off-airport aviation aerospace companies, almost $14 billion. And then airports, 109 airports, about $10.6 billion, for a total of almost $44 billion in annual economic activity. That means aviation aerospace, those three sectors combined, make it the number 2 industry in Oklahoma, right behind oil and gas and right ahead of agriculture. And most folks don't get that. They don't understand that. When you go talk to an Oklahoman, they don't understand. They know that you have Tinker Air Force Base. They know they have American Airlines. There's Boeing. Right here in Stillwater, America, you have commercial airline service. But they don't grasp the gravity of the aviation aerospace sector across the state. And it really is pretty impressive when you come to think about it. So that being said, where do these come from? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. We're going to go briefly through high-level statewide impacts, then we're going to drill down onto the Stillwater impacts, and I would encourage you to ask questions if you do have any questions about the Stillwater impacts or even the statewide impacts. There's 5 buckets that these impacts come from. Sometimes it's putting direct dollars into the bucket and you get a economic activity output. Sometimes it's the reverse, where you actually have the final spending number and then you got to work it back into the econometric model in the reverse fashion to get how many jobs and what the payroll is associated with. So you have these 5 buckets: airport management, airport tenants, capital investment, commercial visitor spending, and general aviation visitor spending. So as I said, $19.3 billion of annual economic activity from military aviation. Broken out here by base, obviously Tinker Air Force Base is the biggest chunk, followed by Altus and Vance at about $1 billion apiece, and the Oklahoma Army National Guard, which is a small amount, but still very important sector of military aviation. One thing you won't see on here is the Air National Guard impacts, and that's because they've been counted on the on-airport aviation impacts. They're actually part of that airport, so they're considered a tenant. Yes, sir.
When you're listing spending there, is that spending within the state?
It is spending within the state. It is also dollars that are being, things that they might have to procure outside the state that are being brought in, that are being improved. So, they might bring in a part that was $1, and then they do 25 cents worth of work on it. That gets counted into the spending metric in terms of what actually they have going on at their military facility.
Okay.
And that's mainly happening at Tinker. Vance and Altus, they do procure, but mostly that's personnel and training. So most of the procurement stuff is coming from Tinker Air Force Base.
Thanks.
Off-airport aviation aerospace employers, almost $14 billion. One thing that we did a little deeper dive on was the Oklahoma City and Tulsa metro areas. The interesting thing here is almost 800 or over 800 aviation and aerospace companies across the state. You combine that with the 400 on-airport aviation business, that's almost 1,200 different aviation companies across Oklahoma, whether it's a single person mom and pop shop that's doing A&P work, or whether that's a 25,000 person single site employer in Tinker Air Force Base. Bless you. This is just the broken out from direct and then indirect and induced. $10.6 billion in annual economic impact from public airports. This is kind of what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the presentation. And if I get a little long-winded, please somebody give me a bell or sing me off the stage here. We have 4 commercial, 105 general aviation airports across the state. The buckets, those 5 buckets, obviously the big chunk of that's coming from our airport tenants like American Airlines, like the Mike Maroney Aeronautical Center down at Will Rogers, $7.6 billion, followed by commercial visitor spending. Obviously, we have a lot of visitors that come to Oklahoma, spend a lot of dollars in our communities and in our states. Now I want to talk about Stillwater's annual economic impact. And I know the first thing everybody looks at is, where in the world is Gary hiding those 663 people? And I do have to say that's the first question. I've done this presentation about 10 times now, whether it's for city councils, Rotary clubs, so on and so forth. And that's the first thing people go to. Where are those 663 jobs at the airport? And Gary said he was hiding them all in the tower. That's a good feat. That's a magic trick I'd like to see. But at the end of the day, what this means, it doesn't mean there's 663 jobs at the airport. It means the airport supports 663 jobs. So that's your direct jobs, that's your indirect jobs, and not all these jobs actually may be physically at the airport on the direct side. So for example, Stillwater Regional Airport is run by the municipality here. I guarantee you there are city staff sitting in this building that are supporting the airport in some respects. It may not be that full person's job, but it's going to be a quarter job or an eighth of a job or a half of a job. All those are going to support the airport. Same thing for the OSU aviation program. Although we have a lot of OSU aviation faculty that are probably at the airport, there's a lot of faculty that are off the airport that are supporting the aviation program at the airport. So something to be really proud of, $70 million of annual economic activity. And the one thing I want you to look at is the commercial service visitor spending impacts. That line right there is really something to be proud of, because that's something that wasn't occurring 2 years ago, year and a half ago, Gary. That's something to pat yourself on the back about, that you attracted aviation, commercial service to this community, and now you almost have a 21 or more than a $21 million of annual economic activity from that commercial service visitor spending impact. And that's people flying into your community, spending dollars as your campus, spending dollars at the hotel room, spending dollars for fuel, rental cars, so on and so forth. That's really something proud to bring to your community, because it shows you that economic development is occurring across the town. Annual payroll. This is one thing that a lot of people don't go too far in depth into, but they understand that aviation and aerospace are good paying jobs. Actually, the average direct job in aviation is just over $73,000 a year. That's pretty impressive. It means we have a lot of good, high-paying jobs in the aviation and aerospace sector, and we're very proud of that here at the Aeronautics Commission, and very proud of that as a state. So, I know, Gary, we get also a lot of questions about this. Well, there's only 1,700 aircraft that come in and out of the Stillwater Regional Airport on an annual basis. No, this is actually just IFR instrument flight rules, so flying in the clouds, flight data that we can track. These are all the destinations that people left out of Stillwater or came to Stillwater from. And you can see most all 50 states across the country are hit. Maybe North Dakota, state of Washington, state of Maine are missing, but a good majority, 80-90% of the states are hit with the airport here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So where do these economic impacts come from? As I was saying earlier, there's really 4 main measures. 1, employment, jobs, that's pretty easy to understand. Then you have annual payroll associated with those jobs. You have spending that the company might do to support its business operations. The payroll and the spending combined together equal annual economic activity. So you have the direct impacts. Again, that's the measurable things I can go out there and survey, I can talk to somebody about, that okay, you have this many employees, you have this much payroll, this much spending equals this much annual economic activity. That gets thrown through the economic model, the in-plan model. You get indirect and induced impacts after that. So, again, how did we collect this data? It was a big, exhaustive effort. Almost 7,000 personnel hours went into this study over the course of a year and a half. Quite impressive that we were able to get this level of detail from our airports, but thank you for Gary and thank you for other airports for providing this information, because without this direct data, we would have been lost. We really would have been lost, and our data would not have been nearly as good coming out of that in-plan model. Same thing for tenants. Tenant surveys were issued. Almost 400 different aviation tenants across the state, employing over 21,000 people. That was a monumental task to get that information from tenants like the OSU Flight Center, like you have a medical flight operation here at the airport at Stillwater Regional. CIP. There's obviously a lot of construction projects. I'm sure you all have approved budgets and noticed that there's a lot of money going from the city to match federal and state grants at the airport. CIP projects provide a great source of annual economic activity for the airport. This is one of the ones that we have to do in reverse. So we can't actually go figure out how many jobs by interviewing the construction company. But we have the final tabulated data is how much we've spent. So we take that spending number and we reverse it through the in-plan model, and that gives us an estimate of our jobs and our payroll associated with those jobs. Same thing for general aviation visitor spending. We're able to survey the general aviation visitors that came to town, figure out how much they spent while they were in town, take that number and reverse it back through the in-plan model to figure out, okay, how many jobs did that support and what was the annual payroll with those jobs. Same thing for the commercial airline visitors. I think did we have a online survey, or was it paper surveys at the airport? Online. So we had online surveys. I think every time they had to log into the Wi-Fi, you had to determine how much money was spent on your trip. Obviously, you all wouldn't have filled that out because you're not a visitor, you're a resident. But folks that are coming into the airport or departing from the airport, you're going to determine how much money was spent in town on an annual basis. That money gets sent back through the in-plan model in the reverse fashion to figure out how many jobs and how much spending was associated with that commercial visitor spending. Just a tally here, $10.6 billion, all the different categories broken out. Last couple of slides, I know I'm running long on time here. One of the things when it comes to economic development, what do we need as a community? What do we need as a state in terms of our economic development support? Well, obviously, trained workforce, highway access, tax incentives, those three biggies are always at any entity, whether it's town, whether it's city, whether it's state, so on and so forth. But those next two that you see on the list, proximity to an airport with scheduled commercial air service and proximity to a general aviation airport, shows you that aviation means business. Without airports, without aviation, how would our companies, how would our employees be able to conduct their business? How would they be able to bring in suppliers and customers to support their business on a day-to-day basis? So, as I was saying earlier, this guy is thinking, are there 20 people at the airport? How are there 660 people at Stillwater Regional Airport? That really is quite amazing. Well, again, it's just the supported jobs that the airport has, direct, indirect, and induced. Now, indirect are most associated with the higher paying jobs, industrial, parts manufacturers, so on and so forth, utility sectors. Induced impacts are more associated with the retail and the service sectors, so your restaurants, your hotels, your taxi services, so on and so forth. These numbers can go back and forth through this in-plan model, whether it's the direct impact giving you the indirect numbers, or whether it's the indirect numbers or the spending numbers going back the reverse fashion and giving you what the actual direct impacts are. And so we're able to double check our math to make sure that the in-plan model is giving us the data and making sure it's a conservative amount of data and not overinflating that recycling of the dollars in the Oklahoma economy. So here's one great example. You have a direct payroll of an airport employee, $500. They go spend $50 at the vet, $150 for groceries, $200 for a doctor's visit. That's $400 of indirect and induced payroll that's going to others. Now, that vet's job, that grocer's job, that doctor's job, their entire job is not supported by the airport, but a fraction of their job is. And if you add up all those fractions at the end of the day, that's how you get your total indirect and induced impact figure, is adding up all those fractions of jobs that are supported by the airport and by the aviation aerospace sector. Again, these are just the multiplier impacts. We usually try and use a conservative multiplier. At some point in time, as the dollars recycle through the economy, it's no longer attributed to the airport. You know, we can't say that that Gary Johnson goes and buys groceries, the grocer goes and takes his dog to the vet then goes and spends money on a doctor visit. You can't have that recycling happen over and over again. At some point, it becomes just unbelievable. Kind of already talked about that. This is the last slide I want to present to you all. And, it's not showing up in the splits, but you will see it in your economic impact packet that I think each one of you have. The total tax revenues that are supported by aviation and aerospace companies. And this is just on airport direct impacts. This is not recycled dollars, but it's almost $500 million on an annual basis, whether it's the sales tax, whether it's lodging tax, state or local. That goes to show you that aviation and aerospace is really contributing to the local tax base. In fact, if you look at the individual Stillwater report here, I think this is a great quad fold folder that Gary provided. In the bottom left corner once you open it up, you'll see almost $4 million of annual state and local tax impacts from the Stillwater Regional Airport, whether that's income tax, whether that's sales tax, or whether that's lodging tax or rental car tax, whatever it might be. That goes to show you that aviation and aerospace is contributing not just to the Oklahoma economy through jobs, but it's supporting the local tax base as well. So that being said, I know I kind of ran through that pretty quickly, and it was a little abrupt, but I'll stand for questions or comments.
Counselors?
When you say it's a snapshot, that means I can't look at these numbers and say this is new money that's been generated by our airport, for example, right? So if visitors to the airport this year spent $12 million while they were in town, that doesn't tell me it's $12 million in new money that wasn't being spent before we had commercial air service, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's just a net number and not, or a gross number and not net of however else they could have gotten here.
Right. And we actually, unique situation in Stillwater, since when we started collecting our data, you guys only had air service starting last August. We actually had to take 6 months instead of the full year that we had for Will Rogers, Tulsa. And so we took those first 6 months and multiplied it out to get our full annual year's worth of data. And then we multiply that. And because we only took that first 6 months, because air service has continually gone up and up and up, I think that you're actually seeing a higher number realistically if we would have been able to do the full annual survey.
But again, it's just showing me totals. It's not showing me what was gained when we got new air service here.
Well, it could show, I mean, for example, you have no air service before, 2-3 years ago, and you look at that line item, the $21 million of annual economic activity from commercial visitor spending, that's new money that's coming into the community.
Except those people came for football games by driving up here before.
Well, that too.
I mean, that's, I don't mean to, I mean, the number's great, and the air service is great. I just want to make sure that when we look at the numbers, we're seeing just a total snapshot, and this isn't something that's showing us additional stuff that's been brought that wasn't coming before.
Right, yeah, we didn't take a look at the additional, right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Joyce. Anybody else?
I do. I have one quick question.
Sure.
When you guys do a statewide survey like this, look at all the airports, then what does it mean for next steps for the Stillwater Airport? Do airlines look at this and think, okay, these numbers look great, this is what we're looking for as far as wanting to expand? What are the next steps that we need to look at with these numbers?
So the best next step, and you are doing a good job, and first thing I always tell cities is, hey, this shows that you need to continue supporting your airport. Because a lot of towns don't have the foresight that you do, and that the airport is an asset to the town. They think of it more of a drag to the town. And so they're about 70% of the airports, that's the way they think. Now, they're usually the smaller airports, more rural, but that's usually my first point is, hey, support the airport. It is important to the local economy. It does mean jobs, so on and so forth. But you guys are doing good there. So what I would say is to use this study as an economic development tool. So when you're trying to develop the airport, whether it's the industrial park, whether it's just getting new tenants at the airport, use this as, hey, aviation aerospace is big in Oklahoma. It's big in Stillwater. But we can improve upon that by attracting new business to the airport, new aviation companies, whether it's a parts manufacturer, whether it's even an aircraft manufacturer. We'd love in Oklahoma to have an aircraft manufacturer come back to Oklahoma, and you guys have a lot of available property out there at the Stillwater Regional Airport. So that would be one thing I would look at is from an economic development standpoint, use this to attract businesses to come to town for the aviation perspective. And then also just use it from a simple perspective of trying to get non-aviation business to come to town. We do so well with our airport. We have commercial airline service, so on and so forth. And now we can say, hey, we can justify that. We have data, hard data, that we can use in our pitch to businesses that want to come to Stillwater, America. And so that's what I would say is use it as an economic development tool. Also use it for the airlines. I've been helping out with Will Rogers. They wanted some of the numbers that some of the airlines wanted, and they were amazed to see what the economic impact of Will Rogers is. And just for an airline to see the economic impact of Stillwater, but also the state of Oklahoma, that really will help if you're trying to get additional airline service at some point, whether it's additional flights, different carrier, so on and so forth. You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much for allowing me to come.
It's a good report, thank you.
All right, that brings us to item B, presentation and acceptance by the City Council of the 2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Mr. McNichol.
Off the air here. That report will be presented by Melissa Reams, our CFO.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Melissa Reams, Chief Financial Officer, coming to you tonight to bring a recommendation from the City of Stillwater Audit Committee to accept the annual comprehensive financial report and their single audit report. You've had a report that I submitted with the agenda. Do you have any questions? This is pretty routine for us, so.
Does
We
anyone
appreciate-
actually read the whole thing?
Norman did.
Really?
I did.
No,
I even made some suggestions for it.
Did. I was proud of him.
it's great. It is very thorough.
It is very
Which is
thorough.
good for audits. And I'm very thankful that we have a wonderful finance and accounting staff here that is able to do that, and an audit committee with dedicated public servants on it as well to perform those functions, because that is just a lot.
And I'm
And a
glad
lot
we
of
get
work.
it early.
And
If
it is
I'm-
a report that's really more geared towards the investment community, bonding companies. We're definitely looking at getting what they call a popular audit report that would be more for the layperson.
If I may, Mayor, if anybody has trouble interpreting that report, please give us a call, and I will put you in direct contact with Ms. Reams, and she'll be able to explain it to you. It's difficult to follow the money.
It is. Thank you for getting it to us way in advance so we can look and ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Counselors, is there a motion? Or
Motion
questions?
to accept the audit.
2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the report. Is that how I word it? That's okay. On CC-17-173, please vote. And with a vote of 4-0, the report is accepted on item B.
Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you.
And I will say, as a quick comment, not to interrupt, but sitting in on the audit committee myself, two comments. One, I agree. Thank God that there are people out there that understand all of that. I myself tried to delve into some of the more nitty-gritty aspects of the reports, and quickly found out that I was not smart enough to interpret a large amount of that data. And then two, I will say that the other thing I picked up in sitting in those meetings was the glowing reviews that were given to our staff by the auditors themselves. I never heard a single comment as far as, well, did you think about doing it this way? I mean, they were all glowing. So I want to put that out there that our staff is doing an excellent job.
I'm gonna
So
do it.
well done.
Next. Okay. What do we do next, John?
I would go ahead to general orders and then go back to that hearing item.
Okay. So on item C, approve budget amendment and authorize expenditure of funds for development. Mr. McNichol.
That report is going to be tag teamed, I think, by both Ms. Dennison and Ms. Reams.
Thank you. Paula Dennison, Development Services with Melissa Ream, CFO. What we have before you this evening is a short-term solution for continuing the development engineering review service that is provided. We will be back to you with a long-term solution soon. You can expect it in January or February. We're having those discussions right now. However, for this fiscal year, you authorized us to contract with a firm to perform these services and approved a certain amount for these services. As of the end of October, we are spending very quickly those funds. So we're requesting additional funds to finish out this fiscal year, again, under this short term. And then we will, once again, bring back a long-term solution to you. Melissa will explain the funding revenue source that she has identified. I will go ahead and announce one small change to your report. The report, the recommendation staff is as it stands, but there also needs to be a secondary component to that, and that is to also approve the associated budget amendment that did come out with this report. So it will actually allocate the funds that we're talking about here this evening. Do so approve the funding.
Counselors, questions?
Why are we spending so much on these third-party engineering reviews?
Without getting into a lot of the detail, there are a number of very large, complex projects that are being reviewed currently. Just to give you a couple of them, the ranch up north of town, that is an enormous project that with all of the civil engineering review that comes along with it, and the stormwater review, the apartment complexes that are being built adjacent to campus. We have major subdivisions that have not completed all the way through the process. So anytime those come along, it is very heavy on the front end for the civil and the stormwater reviews that we're seeing.
Do you have a review process in place for those charges? I mean, do we feel like they're reasonable? Do we feel like our third-party service providers maybe are not being as efficient as they could be?
One of the things that has occurred that we are aware of, our reviewer now, currently under contract, is a different firm than has been the reviewer for the past 10 years. So there is some learning curve thrown into that, and we knew that going in. Also, if you will recall, we developed a cost of services study for the Development Services Department, and that was put on hold and set aside. We are going to be resurrecting that soon after the first of the year. And these type of reviews, currently we collect no revenue. There are no fees associated with these type of reviews. So it does look very daunting.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you mentioned that.
and I will tell you that we are
We're working on that too.
working on that, and that same concern that you have is certainly shared by the city of Flint.
Yeah, okay. I just to reiterate, we spend right now an annual budget of $80,000, and we're asking to increase that to a budget for this year of total of $250 or $230?
$230.
$230, and that is money that we pay to an outside engineering firm, plans for buildings and subdivisions here in Stillwater, and we do not charge the builders or the developers of those subdivisions any money for those plans to be reviewed by outside parties.
That is correct.
That is a problem that we need to fix.
We agree.
I know you do.
And this, unfair question at this point, but given what we're possibly authorizing tonight, is there any kind of feel or estimate of how this number might change in January or February?
No, sir.
Okay.
Our change in long-term solution that we're looking at, We are evaluating many alternatives to contracting with a single outside firm to perform these services. Of course, we're going to also be bringing back, does the city council wish to start a fee for any of these services that could help offset now or whatever long-term in the future?
So there's a lot of
there-
variable in between now and
Yes,
the end of January.
yes, there are.
Okay.
But it is our estimate that, or our forethought, if you will, that additional $100,000 will get us through the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, any more questions, or is there a motion?
I did want to hear from Melissa about where this money is coming from.
We have enjoyed a very robust use tax collection, and if you'll remember, Paula and I stood in this same position back in March or April asking for an increase to the use tax revenue budget to offset an increase for development engineering review back in fiscal 17. This is a very similar situation. Continues to outpace what we have budgeted, so I feel very comfortable in coming to you and saying, let's raise our budget in use tax up to, I believe it's $1,250,000, and that we still will be, it still will have enough there, the shortfall that we have in sales tax, and be able to meet the needs that the development services has. So your budget impact is kind of a null impact because you're raising revenues, but you're raising the expenditure at the same time.
So we're getting more use tax planning
Than
to
what we
get,
had
and we're
budgeted
using
for.
that.
Right, so we have
the-
positive variance on that, on the use tax side.
And the use tax comes mainly from construction activity, is that
It comes
right?
from a lot of places. It's goods and services that have been brought into Stillwater that have not had state of Oklahoma sales on them. And so if you look around the city, of course, the first thing people see is all this construction going on, and that is where a lot of this is coming from. But there are other entities that remit use tax on a monthly basis, specifically designated to our city.
Is there a motion?
A motion, or move to approve the recommendation from staff and
And
change the budget amendment?
approve the budget
And
amendment.
approve the
Thank
budget
you.
amendment?
Approve the associated budget amendment.
Both of those at the same time?
Second.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve item C and approve the associated budget amendment. Correct? Okay, please vote.
That's what I meant.
With a vote of 4-0,
Thank you
it
very
has
much.
been approved. Mr. Dorman, I made a mistake earlier. When we were on the public hearings, I forgot on item B that we needed to vote to postpone on that.
Please.
Can we go back to that?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, so number 6 on the public hearings, this was one in yellow that is a memo to postpone to January 8th. I need a motion on that.
I'll motion to table that proposal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table item B, public hearings until January.
Postpone.
Postpone.
Postpone until January 8th. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, item B has been postponed until January 8th.
That's all right.
Okay, that brings us to resolutions. Resolution number CC-21, authorizing the mayor of the city of Stillwater, Oklahoma, a municipal corporation to sign and issue an election proclamation calling for a general election and a runoff election if needed in the city of Stillwater. Councilors, questions, motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number CC-2017-21. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, resolution number 2017-21 has been approved. That brings us to ordinances. On first reading, Mr. Dorman.
You want me to go ahead and read?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Ordinance number 3393, an ordinance amending the Stillwater City Code by amending Chapter 23, Land Development Code, Article 23, Overlay Districts to create Division 4, 12th Avenue Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, Section 23-21 created, Section 23-276.2 Legal Description, Section 23-276.3 Purpose and Intent, Section 23-276.4 Administration, Section 23-276.5 Permitted Uses, 3-276.6 Design Standards, Section 23-276.6.1 Building Front Facade, Section 23-276.6.2 Building Materials, Section 23-276.6.3 Building Design, Section 23-276.7 Accessory Buildings, Section 23-276.8 Driveways, Section 23-276.12 Bulks, or .9 Lighting, Section 23-276.10 Landscaping, Section 23-276.11 Parking, Section 23-276.12 Bulk Standards, and Section 23-276.13 Lot Subdivision Requirements. Read this by title only tonight per Article 2 of the City Charter.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes, sir.
Does this ordinance include the specific legal description and the map apply? When we do second reading of this ordinance, will the language actually designate that, or does it just create the category that then gets applied later?
It only creates the category because we still have the hearings on the larger area that still need to be done, and so we want to insert all of the area at one time as opposed to sections.
So this ordinance creates an overlay district for the neighborhood conservation, but it does not designate which properties are subject to that neighborhood overlay.
Right, that comes after another round of public hearings.
Okay, so the language be the language that we have had hearings and meetings on to determine that, what the overlay includes and what it forbids and all that sort of stuff. We've already covered all of that, and that hasn't changed with this reading of the ordinance.
That's correct.
But if we postponed until January 8th, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What would the harm be of just waiting, since we don't have anything to read?
It's up to you. We were simply trying to move the process down the road. If you want to wait, then, you'll have the text will be all in place, and then the text, and you'll still have to do a first reading and a second reading. Whereas if you want to make adjustments before you second read it, you can always just postpone the second reading to a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, so we discussed this in the Land Development Subcommittee, and we wanted to get this overlay category in the book. We could apply it once we had figured out the total land area that it was going to cover. My understanding is that the definitions of these ordinances, the definitions of the overlays in these ordinances are, and maybe Paula can help me with this one, but we didn't change the overlay characteristics when we more lots covered by the mixed-use overlay, correct?
That is correct. The text that the City Council held the public hearing on back in October remains the same. Where that text, once it becomes law, not today, but once it becomes law, what is then applied to specific properties is going to go through a new public hearing, public notification process through Planning Commission and to City Council. And I'll just elaborate just a small bit on that, and that may answer some other questions. Also, is that concentrated on the study area that was the properties right along 12th Avenue, very small area, in relation to the neighborhood's expanded area, we are still going to notice all of that area for the then law to their individual properties. So as City Attorney Dorman alluded to, we're not going to come back at the next round and apply just to those properties in the study area and then come back again and apply to the properties in the expanded area. It will all be looked at one nation of the law to the property.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, just so I'm clear, maybe you guys, I mean, the concerns I heard expressed in public comment section of the meeting tonight were around what the mixed-use overlay gets applied to. That there were not concerns addressed about the fact that we overlays, but just where they go.
Where they go.
And so, I am in favor of moving forward with these readings tonight so that we can get these overlays on the books and so that we're ready to go as soon as we've got all the other property noticed, and that we can apply the overlays wherever that ends up being, and that may change between but we've got the ordinances in the book so we can apply them when they're ready.
And I appreciate that, because I came here thinking, I thought I wanted to wait, but that's why we wait and we listen to everybody, because sometimes you change your mind. I agree.
This has been a really long.
And you've been on the land development code, you know what you're talking about, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
The idea here is that we're just getting the overlays defined, and then we will apply them once we've had full public hearing on where they should be applied.
We're sorry
Is there-
for confusion.
Yeah. Is there a motion?
Motion to advance the second reading.
We have a motion and a second to advance to second reading on ordinance number 3393. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, ordinance number 3393 has been advanced to second reading. And that takes us to ordinance number 3394, Mr. Dorman.
An ordinance amending the Stillwater City Code by amending Chapter 23 Land Development Code, Article 13 Overlay Districts to create Division 5, 12th Avenue Neighborhood Mixed-Use Overlay District, Section 277.1 created, Section 23-277.2 Legal Description, Section 23-277.3 Purpose and Intent, Section 23-277.4 Administration, Section 23-277.5 Permitted Uses, 23-277.6 Permitted Uses, Restrictions, Section 23-277.7 Design Standards, Section 23-277.1 Building Front Facade, Section 23-277.7 Building Design, Section 23-277.8 Accessory Buildings, Section 23-277.9 Driveways, Section 23-277.10 Lighting, Section 23-277.11 Landscaping, Section 23-277, Section 23-277.13 Signage, Section 23-277.14 Bulk Standards, and Section 23-277.15 Lot Subdivision Requirements. And again, these will be by title only.
Motion to advance the second.
We have a motion and a second to advance ordinance number 3394 to second reading. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, ordinance number 3394 has been advanced to second reading. That brings us to second reading. Item A, Mr. Dorman.
Ordinance 339, utility easement on property addressed as 1710 East 6th Avenue.
Councilors, do we have a motion?
Motion to advance, or motion to approve ordinance 3390.
We have a motion and a second to adopt.
Adopt.
Yes, ma'am.
Adopt 3390. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, 3390 has been adopted. Item B, second reading, Mr. Dorman.
Ordinance 3391, an ordinance closing a portion of a utility easement on property addressed as 1824 West University.
Is there a motion or question?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt on ordinance number 3391. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, ordinance number 3391 has been adopted. That moves us to item C, Mr. Dorman, second reading.
An ordinance rezoning tracts of land addressed as 602 Southwest Street from CG PUD Commercial General District Planned Unit Development to CG Commercial General District.
Counselors, motion?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, ordinance number 3392 has been adopted. That brings us to, I am going to switch the order a little bit and go to number 10, appointments. That's okay with everybody? And that's on the Stillwater Meadow. Joe Haney, Beth Buchanan, and Carrie Couch have submitted applications to be reappointed. The committee met and approved the applications to be resubmitted, and also the vice chief of, who is Dr. Kara Pence, submitted 2 names for consideration for the Board of Trustee liaison, and those names were Dr. Melinda Webb and Dr. Mark Payton. I would like to make a motion
Yes.
to accept Dr. Melinda Webb as the liaison for the board, and to accept all of the recommendations for Joe Haney, Beth Buchanan, and Carrie Couch. Do I do those together?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Second.
Second, to accept all reappointments of Joe Haney, Carrie Couch, and Beth Buchanan, and to accept Dr. Melinda Webb as the liaison for the Board of Trustees for Stillwater Medical Center. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, all of the appointments have been approved. To reports from officers and boards. City Attorney, Mr. Dorman.
2 items. Request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B3 for the purpose of confidential communication regarding the purchase or appraisal of real property. Request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection N for the purpose of conferring on matters pertaining to economic development, including the transfer of property, financing, or the creation of a proposal to entice a business to locate within the city of Stillwater, because public disclosure of the matter to be discussed would interfere with the development of products and services and would also violate the confidentiality of the business.
Mr. Dorman, City Manager.
2 items, Mayor. Thank you. As a reminder, all city offices will be closed Monday the 25th and Monday, January 1st for the holidays. Normal office operations and times will continue between and after these holidays. Residents will still receive trash and recycling pickup as usual on these days, but not yard. Finally, tomorrow we'll be welcoming our newest K-9 officer to the Stillwater Police Department. Officer Egon would love to celebrate with you at his come-and-go reception from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Stillwater Community Center tomorrow. And I would remind everybody that Citizens Academy alumni and community and interested parties donated to replace a canine that fell ill and passed away. So we very much appreciate that support.
Counselor Zanotti, do you have news?
I do. Gosh, a week from today, this time amounts of packaging and wrapping paper. We encourage you to recycle all cardboard, wrapping paper that is not foil, shiny, or glittery, plastic containers, and all metal and aluminum cans.
Counselor Joyce.
For those wanting to celebrate with fireworks for New Year's, remember that fireworks are not allowed within the city limits.
I'm glad you have.
Before starting any fires on your property, please check to see if there's a burn ban. You can go to forestry.ok.gov for a map of counties and burn ban information.
I guess along that same vein, for those of you that live outside of Stillwater city limits, consider applying for the 2018 Rural Fire Service Contract. The Stillwater Fire Contract fee is $100 for the year and ensures that the response fee for any potential fire on your contracted property does not exceed $2,000. And if you'd like more information on this, you can contact the Stillwater Fire Administration.
It's a beautiful segue.
Those went together well.
Yes.
Anything else? All right, is into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move into the executive session. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, we are moving into executive session. Happy holidays to everybody who attended. Thank you.